Ian, wake up, Ian. Ian, come on.
5 more minutes. Look, and stop poking me.
We've got to record the podcast and you've got all the duvet.
Oh dear, so many people are going to think that's true. We did actually spend the night in the same hotel, didn't we?
Indeed, but not under the same duvet.
No, because
it
was too hot.
I'm too hot. No, explain to people where we really are to stop the rumours.
We are in the Radio X and Radio Heart studios at Global Radio, and I've just done some selfies which will give my boss a heart attack when I've announced a new show on Heart. I think we'd be quite good on Heart 80s, don't you?
Well, you've got that sort of musical taste.
Or lack of musical taste. By the way, the seat that you're sitting in was about 4 years ago. I interviewed Olivia Newton-John in this studio, and she sat exactly where you're sitting.
Does that make you John Travolta?
No, it makes me think, let's get physical.
Let's not.
Spoil sport. Right, let me tell everyone what we're going to be talking about in the podcast today. There's a lot to get through. We're going to... No, I can't do that. I was going to say, we don't talk... No, we are going to talk about Cliff Richard because I think that's one of the big stories of the week. We're going to be talking about whipping, which you're an expert on, I gather. We're going to be talking about Margaret Hodge having a right old go at Jeremy Corbyn. We're going to talk about books that taught us about sex, I think, aren't we? We might talk a little bit about Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, and crime figures, Trump and Putin, and Brexit. What more could anyone ask for?
When it comes to violent crime, we've talked previously about a sort of much wider approach, a sort of public health approach to tackling violent crime, like they developed up in Glasgow, like we're working on in Birmingham, actually, where you bring in, alongside the police, health service, for example. So in our emergency...
Can you do this bit in a Birmingham accent? All right.
Don't undermine those of us who live outside London, you south east
ghastly
based
accent, though, isn't it?
No, it is. Bloody hell.
It really is.
You LBC people...
I could not marry someone with a Birmingham accent. I'm sorry. Call me a snob if you want.
I couldn't marry you anyway, so...
But you haven't got one.
So no, you're right. I haven't got one. But I'm still not married. But I'm still not marrying you. Anyway, stop being so bloody southeast and London centric.
No, I like lots of regional accents. I just don't like the Birmingham one.
I like lots of regional accents.
I love a bit of Welsh.
Right. Listen, shut up. Listen to me talking to you about violent crime.
Right.
I first found out about it it was only about 5 minutes before it was announced, actually. I got a text from somebody who should remain nameless. I thought, really? Anyway, I texted David and said, right, if this is happening, come on my programme tomorrow and do an interview, which he then gave me a call and we talked for 3 or 4 minutes. As you can imagine, at that point, he was then being deluged with calls. And I don't think he had much alternative, because we all know that he nearly resigned 2 weeks ago. And at the last minute, I think, decided to stick it out. But when earlier in the week you asked the Prime Minister what this new facilitated customs arrangement thing is, and it's denied that it even exists, and then a few hours later it's announced. I mean, that does put you in a tricky position, I think. And it's quite clear that although he kind of denied this in the interview that he did with me, that it was because Ollie Robbins had essentially usurped him. I mean, I think we all know that was a big part of the reason. So he did come in and do an interview in the middle of the afternoon on Monday, and halfway through the interview I saw my producer crawling along the floor, and I'm thinking, what on earth is she doing? And then she handed me her phone, and of course it said Boris Johnson has resigned. So I immediately put it to David, and his initial reaction was and he just let out a massive sigh. And he said, I don't think Boris needed to resign, and explained why. And of course that then became a story in itself. I think it was, I think in terms of Boris, he either had a choice, he could resign or he didn't resign. If he didn't resign, I think people would have thought, well, that's him finished. And if he did resign, people said, well, he's just following David Davis and he doesn't really believe it. And his resignation letter, I think, was overthought. He was looking for that in office and not in power phrase and didn't quite come up with it.
What do you... I didn't hear your interview with David Davis, but what was his reasoning as to why Boris didn't need to resign?
That it wasn't his direct area of responsibility. It was David that was doing the negotiating, and he couldn't argue a case that he didn't believe in. He said, we all have to argue things that we don't believe in as through collective responsibility in cabinet. But when you are the minister responsible for it, it's very difficult to do it certainly when you're in those kind of negotiations.
I think that's absolutely right. His analysis is right. What I couldn't understand, though, was why neither he nor Boris resigned actually on the day. And it wasn't just about they'd have to have called a local taxi to take them away or walked up the drive. Because Boris actually, from everything we hear, proposed a toast to the Prime Minister at the end of the Chequers Day. So what happened between, raising a glass and signing his resignation letter? I didn't really understand that.
Well, I can't speak for Boris, and I'm not going to speak for David, but he said that, and he said this publicly, so I'm not revealing anything really. Obviously he's got a form in resigning, so he kind of knows the procedures that you should adopt. And he said that he couldn't resign on the night, partly because he wouldn't have been able to contact his constituency chairman because they confiscated the phones. And he said, look, it's never a good idea to resign in high dudgeon. So he wanted the weekend to think about it. He wanted to talk to his wife about it, and presumably other people too. So I believe that. I think it would have been seen as a sort of Heseltinian act of irresponsibility if either of them had resigned on the night. I don't think he was one of the ones like Boris who raised a toast to the Prime Minister. He had given his reservations. They were outvoted in Cabinet. He wasn't the only one. I think there were 7 or 8 of them that objected to what was happening. But if you lose the battle, you have a decision to make. You either back it up in public or you don't.
He created you, didn't he?
Gordon.
Yes.
I think some people might say Tony created me.
Well, that's what you'd like to think. But he did make you Home Secretary, one of the top 3 jobs, which Tony never did.
And I've always been grateful to him for it. Tony put me in the Cabinet, but you're right, Gordon made me Home Secretary. I had a sort of hand in this myself, can I say, Ian, through my hard work and excellent reputation.
It's about 2 o'clock
Stop
in the morning.
Laughing.
2 o'clock in the morning last night. I was reading this book on the Kindle, and Alistair Campbell was talking about you being on Question Time, and I can't remember this must have been about October 2009, and I think it must have been after you'd quit.
It was after, yeah.
And I can't remember who else was on, and he said so-and-so did quite well. Jackie Smith just about held her own.
Oh, charming! This was part of the sort of march towards the sound of guns strategy, the masochism strategy that I had for myself, which, looking back, was utter bollocks. And I should have, when I stepped down as Home Secretary, I should have given up my parliamentary seat at that point, not done all of the sort of come and have a go at me if you think you're hard enough stuff that I did.
Oh, you think you should have quit and caused a by-election?
No, not quit and caused a by-election, but said that I wasn't going to restand in my seat.
Well, that's interesting. Why do you think that?
I sort of said, I did this, I owe it to my constituents, and I'm going to sort of show them that everything that's been said about me isn't all true and all of this sort of stuff. And it was just purgatory.
But what good would that have done? I mean, how would that have changed anything?
It wouldn't. It might have. Well, what it would have done is it would have removed me a bit from the firing. So I'm not saying this was a sort of virtuous political thing. This was a personal protection thing. So it would have removed me from the firing line. It would have enabled me to just go up and try and start rebuilding something else more quickly. It would have meant I wouldn't be in that position of having lost my seat, because it doesn't matter how many times you say to people, it was a marginal seat, I was always going to lose it. If you lose a parliamentary seat, even not under a cloud like I was, if you lose a parliamentary seat, then you're a loser,
Yeah.
And
Don't
that
I know
always... that always hangs over you. So all of those things would have been removed. And so I might have got back to the sort of very happy professional life that I have now slightly quicker if I'd done that. And I wouldn't have had to go through some of the sort of stuff that I did go through. But I felt a duty, and I felt I wanted to, I wanted to try to not justify myself, but try to put some of the other side of the story. But you're always on you're on a loser, frankly, when you've been tarred with the brush that I had been tarred with at that particular point. So I was probably wasting my time. In retrospect, I think I was wasting my time.
Now, as Home Secretary, you had bodyguards, didn't you?
I don't think I've ever said that before.
Oh, we've got an exclusive. Now, as Home Secretary, you had bodyguards, didn't you?
Indeed, yes. And I am very excited that this Sunday, so it will have gone out before this podcast comes out, there will have been the first episode of the new series on the BBC called The Bodyguard, written by Jed Mercurio, who wrote Line of Duty, for those people who saw it, which I also absolutely loved, and it was a big hit for the BBC. And essentially the story is about a female Home Secretary, Julia Montague, who takes a particularly hardline and authoritarian approach to tackling terrorism, which is not actually popular with her own government, let alone more widely. And I think she's, the suggestion is she's got an eye to the main chance, which is a way of talking about women who are ambitious, incidentally.
So it's based on you, then?
Being the Home Secretary. Yes, I was ambitious. Did I have an eye to the main chance? No. Was I unpleasantly authoritarian? No.
Yes. Jack Boots Jackie. So who would you award your sexiest female politician of the year to?
I haven't got one.
Oh,
I
no.
Couldn't do this. I know, this is one of the ones I couldn't do this bloody last year either. Oh, no, I tell you, I'm going to choose the same person as I chose last year. My very good mate, who I have known for longer than I would like to say, Caroline Flint. She gives 50-something women a good name. She looks bloody gorgeous.
She does, actually. Now, that would be... No, shall I say this?
What? What's she going to say?
That would be a DVD that many men would pay a lot of money for. You and Caroline Flint together.
Doing karaoke?
Yes, that's what I meant, yeah. Well,
yeah, of course it was.
I have chosen Emma Little Pengelly. Do you know her?
Oh.
She's a DUP
I'm
MP.
going to have to Google her.
Well, she was on this week on Thursday with Andrew Neil, and I had heard her name before, but I'd never seen her, and she's absolutely stunning.
Right.
Which I don't think she would mind me saying. I mean, it's got to a point in our lives now where men can't actually give women compliments about their looks without being introduced as being creepy or whatever.
That's utter bollocks, Ian, as we have previously discussed. As long as you are not a creepy perv, which you're not.
No. Well, not on women anyway.
And as long as you don't as long as you don't reduce every politician to what they look like, which we don't,
no,
I think we can get away with
no,
a bit
because she spoke a lot of common sense on this week, let me just say. Let's move on to sexiest male politician. Over to you.
I've got Jeremy Corbyn.
No, you haven't.
I love a bit of beardy action myself.
Doesn't it chafe, though?
If you put beard oil on, it can be nice and soft.
Oh, right. But you're not really choosing him.
No, because once again, I can't, people will think I'm cracking on to them if I say I think they're sexy.
Yeah, well, look, I've got the same problem on this one, haven't I?
Oh, yes, you have. All right, OK. Because if I said I thought Tom Tugendhat was a, nice bit of eye candy, it sounds completely inappropriate, doesn't it?
I thought you'd pick Brandon Lewis.
Oh, yes, of course. Lovely Brandon. No, but we're supposed to be keeping that. That's our secret, our little secret, me and Brandon, isn't it?
Is it? I wonder if his wife knows.
Well, she was probably sitting there when I was cracking on to him via text, wasn't it?